Why is the royal necklace on my neck? I asked, looking at the maids, who made sure to avoid my glance as they kept their heads down. I beseech you to answer me now. Me, milady. The queen commanded us not to say anything but get you ready, a maid answered, a fearful face on. I think. My words were cut short when the door opened and my mother walked in as gracefully as ever. Leave us, she commands, relieving the maids of their duties. I asked you, mother, what this means. I pointed to the necklace, my face red with anger. Why am I the one wearing this, and not Catrona? Why would Catrona need to wear it? I gasped, looking at her like she'd grown a pair of horns. This is the royal necklace given to a daughter of a royal family on their wedding day. I stated this in a matter-of-fact tone, not desiring her pretense. Good, you know. Then I don't have to explain much to you. She elegantly walked behind me, staring at me through the mirror. You are to wed King Sviatoslavic in an hour. I felt my knees go weak. It was a good thing I was seated. Mother, I yelled, getting up from my seat. You can't be serious, you know for a fact that the king asked for Catrona to be his wife and not me. You don't need to remind me, I am very aware of the situation. She says it indignantly. Do Father and Devon know about this? Who do you think advocated the intelligence of your taking Catrona's place in the Isle? I was taken aback by the fact that I truly considered the notion that they still cared about me. They never regarded me as a member of the royal family. I was never useful to them until now. My vision blurred as I stared at the woman who was supposed to be my mother, as she stared back without a glimmer of remorse or regret. Her eyes were just plain cold, like they had always been toward me. King Sviatoslavic would be furious when he finds out he got the wrong bride. I'm sure he will. Who won't be? She was repulsed. It would be irredeemably by the time he gets back to Nisha. My lips shuddered. I felt so broken and helpless with no way out of this dilemma. I think about how much worse my life would get from here. You have no say in this, Letitia. Either you get married or you get kicked out of the palace and kingdom. You know very well how gruesome the world can be for a young, unprotected female, not to talk of a princess. I looked into her eyes and saw she meant every word she said. There wasn't any hesitation in her eyes. Tears pulled down my eyes as I stared at her, broken beyond repair. You win, mother. I will get married instead of Catrona. My mother looked at me with a bored expression. Good. The maid will be back in to get you ready. King Sviatoslavic would be here in an hour and would not be staying long. Yes, mother. You have done good for your family, Letitia, my mother said, giving a nod before leaving. I stumbled back, holding the chair to steady myself. I felt my legs giving way, so I took a seat. Looking back in the mirror, I tear up at the sight of my reflection. I was the shell of the person I once was. I couldn't recognize the person staring at me. It had been a moment ago when I had a smile on my face at how great I looked, and now my hazel eyes looked lifeless, filled with pain and sorrow. I covered my mouth, holding back the sob that tried to escape. Looking beside me, I watched as the maids walked back into my chamber. This time they were in a white dress. We need to get you ready, milady, one of them spoke, her eyes everywhere but mine. I seemed to lose my will to talk as I got to my feet to let them do their duty. The door swung, and Catrona walked in with a victorious smirk on her face. Why isn't she dressed yet? It's just about time for the wedding. I'm sorry, Princess Catrona, the queen had commanded us to leave as she talked to Princess Letitia. We were only called back in to assist the princess. Get right into it then. She hounded, standing in front of me, looking captivating like always. I can't thank you enough, Letitia. You have done this kingdom some good and will be remembered for your sacrifice. The way she said it, it sounded like she expected to hear about my death anytime soon. Who wouldn't? Though I feel bad for you, not only are you going to be married to that savage king, you have to suffer with his horrible, disgusting appearance and smell. She carried on, waving her hand in my face. Syra, my personal maid, did some snooping. She heard from a maid in the Turian kingdom who had gone to the Nisha kingdom to visit her sister, who worked as a maid there, and was able to see how hideous the king looked. I paid no heed to her words, and wordlessly let the maids carry on doing their task. After the emotional abuse I went through, I never once lost my modesty, yet today it felt like that. I used all my willpower, trying not to break down again, but I wasn't able to stop the tears from strolling down my cheek as the maid finished getting me ready. My face was powdered again, removing every trace of tears, and a white veil was placed upon my head, hiding my face from every predator. I guess this was where my journey ended. At least I would be put out of my misery. The white veil placed on my head fell down to my shoulders, hiding my face. At that point, I wasn't sure what I was feeling. Was it my nerves, or was it pure fear? I took a deep breath, ignoring Kaytrona's presence as she kept babbling about how the king and queen were planning on marrying her off to the king of Lumarin. Of course, she would be excited. After the king's visit to our kingdom months ago, Kaytrona had swooned over his handsome features and wealth. Though the Nisha were richer, the king of Lumarin was less scary, and he worshipped the ground on which Kaytrona walked. It was clear to see that both of them were smitten with each other. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts, bringing me back to reality. I turned to see a maid walking in with a distressed look on her face. "Milady, the king asked me to inform you that it's time, and would be waiting for you at the entrance of the ballroom. I guess this is my cue to leave," Kaytrona said, coming to stand in front of me with both hands on my shoulders. "It seems this will be our final goodbye. Have a happy married life." There was no hint of honesty in her voice as she smirked and walked out of my room. Blinking back the tears from my eyes, I looked around the room I had spent 18 years of my life in, peering at it one last time, with sadness grabbing my heart. The door pulled open, and I walked outside, going towards the ballroom where the ceremony was going to take place. I stood in front of the closed door with my father beside me, our hands intertwined, but neither of us uttered a word. I knew for a fact that it was pointless. There was nothing I would say to make him have a tiny bit of compassion for me. "Don't even think of running away or doing anything stupid that would harm our kingdom, or you and everyone else in the kingdom will suffer the consequences. Take this as an act of sacrifice for our kingdom. This is something you should be proud of. Finally, you have done something worthy for your people. Don't think of doing anything to jeopardize it," my father threatened before the door opened. The guests all rose to their feet as the king walked me down the path. I kept my head down throughout the walk, as the royally ordained elder officiated the wedding. I couldn't bring myself to look at the nightmare standing in front of me. Today we are gathered here to witness the great union between our kingdom and that of the Nisha. The elder continued, "Without further setbacks, I would request Prince Devon to come tie the holy rope on the king and princess." Still not turning to look at my future husband, I raised my head as my brother's name was spoken. My brother avoided looking at me as he quickly wrapped the crimson rope around our extended hands. He took the bowl of oil, applied it to our hands, and then handed my husband the gold bracelet that the elder had given him so that he could put it on my wrist. He then went back to his seat. With that being done, we congratulate the king and princess on their marriage. The crowd applauded when musicians and dancers entered the hall to amuse the guests. I stood there disheartened as everybody got to their feet and started singing happy tunes. Only after I felt something being attached to my hand did I look away from the crowd's joyous celebration and look down at my wrist to see the crimson thread securely fastened next to the gold marriage bracelet. My gaze gradually shifted upward, from a sharp jawline to full lips and a pointed nose. As I approached his eyes, I was almost knocked back by how intense they were. His eyes were unlike anything I had ever seen. They were the most beautiful, but also the most lethal. One of his eyes was deep blue, and the other was amber, almost like fire. I kept staring at his eyes and couldn't help but think of the look a predator gets just before pinning its prey. Me, being the prey. He didn't say anything to me as he proceeded down the path, which was made plain for him by those on the dance floor. I just stood there, staring at his enormous frame and not knowing what to do. Even the tallest person in our realm was dwarfed by how tall he was. Every step he took caused his muscles to flex, demonstrating just how powerful they were. He came to a stop in his path, turning to face me with a sour expression. I sucked in a breath while playing with my fingers. You don't expect me to carry you out the hall now, do you? Wife. His voice was deep and rich, but it also carried a lot of power. However, it wasn't his voice per se that caught my attention, rather, it was the way he called me wife, with such disdain in it. Forcing my legs to move from where I stood, I walked over to him until we got to the door. Giving one last look at my family, I see my parents wearing their familiar-looking smirks, except for Devlin, who still hasn't looked my way. It was too late for him to feel guilty. After all, Kaytrona was more important to him and to them than I was. As soon as we stepped outside, I was astounded by the troops' height and physique. According to the expression on their faces, they weren't happy about their king marrying a Haitian princess. It appeared as though they were attending a war rather than a wedding. Do you space out all the time? My ears were ringing at the Nisha King's irate voice. Get in the damn carriage, so we can leave. I don't have all day, he shouts, cutting off my opportunity to speak. I guess the only thing you are good at is making yourself look pretty, dippets, stupid, ... I didn't need a genius to tell me that he had insulted me, even though I had no clue what he said. Not wanting to anger him any more than he already was, I walked over to the carriage, with a guard standing there, helping me in. Not before giving me a hard glare. I looked out the window, expecting the king to come in as well, but was shocked when I saw him mounting a horse and riding out of the palace without sparing me a glance. Inhaling deeply, I turned my gaze to my hands. Though I had zero to no expectation of him feeling anything for me, the rejection still hurts. I thought of Gala as I took one final look at the palace. I hadn't seen her during the wedding and could only assume that she was all right. I was able to remove the veil from my face by closing the carriage's window. I slid my hands into my lap and gripped my skirt firmly in an attempt to contain the sob that threatened to escape my lips.
Darium's POV.
Fuck. How much I detest being in the Ahades. I've only been here for a split second, but now I'm starting to feel like 1,000 ants are crawling up my body. I had just arrived here, and the first thing I noticed was a rich, spoiled brat making a scene in the marketplace because she had misplaced her priceless earrings while pointing accusing fingers at helpless onlookers. Why do they feel the need to step upon someone beneath them just because they had the privilege to? That was a very repulsive character to portray. Don't even get me started with their king. King Leandros. He has been doing everything possible to unite our kingdom so as to gain more power. All he wanted was more riches and power. To be feared, just like the Nisha were, even if it meant giving away his daughter. You know it won't hurt to smile. With the way your face looks, one would assume you are attending a funeral. Nikolay nudged my shoulders with a smile on his face. He has been a close friend to me and was one of my trusted commanders, but right at the moment, I wanted nothing more than to detach his head from that neck of his. I see no reason for me to smile or be happy. It is a funeral if I have to spend the rest of my life with a spoiled Ahadesian princess. I grumbled out in frustration, glancing at the castle ahead of us. It's understandable, but still, a smile won't kill, Darium. You were the one who brought up the alliance and asked to marry the princess. I groaned, remembering how I had stupidly blurted out the marriage proposal to King Leandros. Don't remind me, I'm already living to regret it. I blamed it all on the Council of Elders, with their constant demand for an heir to the throne. If it were up to me, I wouldn't mind getting one of my mistresses pregnant, but no. Costumes demand that an heir be gotten through legitimate means, and a bastard won't be crowned prince. King Leandros had arrived at the perfect time, seeking help against the Hayatia, and at that time I had foolishly thought it was a good idea for a marriage alliance between the two kingdoms. King Sviatoslavic.
It's a pleasure to have you here in my kingdom. Welcome.
King Leandros greeted me with such delight in his voice that I knew better than to be weary of whatever he was up to. He looked behind me, taking in the view of my soldiers standing there, towering over his own, and he visibly gulped. Let's get this over with, Leandros. I purposely avoided addressing him with his title. I watched as he clenched his jaw, his nose flared up, he was pissed, but yet he didn't say a thing. Knowing this for a fact, he stood no chance. He nodded, directing me into the palace and taking us to the ballroom while the rest of my men stood outside. The guard standing at the front of the ball pushed the door open, and the room was filled with silence with their eyes on us. Mostly on me and Nicolai behind me. The people stared in surprise at me, like they couldn't believe what they were seeing, and began to whisper hysterically amongst themselves. What did they expect, me wrapped in animal furs and blood pouring down my chest? I could hear the sound of Nicolai chuckling and also take in the reactions of the people. It's amazing seeing them charmed by you and hoping to get a little bit of your attention, Nico said with an amused look as he stared at the women in the hall, who looked at us with fear and desire. I didn't say anything, wanting nothing more than to get the wedding over and done with. The door opened again, getting the attention of everyone as we watched a guard walk in, announcing the arrival of my so-called bride. You do know you have to wed her again when we get back home. Do you have to remind me? I can't believe I'm going from one dreadful event to another. I think you should give her a chance. Who knows, she might be the one to tame your cold heart. I scoffed, standing at the front, waiting for the door to open.
That is never going to happen. My heart will never belong to her.
I say this with detest, watching King Leandros walk in, locking hands with a slender woman by his side, a veil on her head covering her face. They walked to where I stood, handing her over to me, and the wedding ceremony carried on. To be honest, I blocked out every word the officiator was saying. I kept my face passive through it all. It was when I heard the cheers of the people that I realized the wedding was over. Turning to look at my wife, I couldn't help but notice how well the dress aligned her features. She was indeed blessed, and I imagined what it would feel like to caress her skin as she moans. No, she was not to be trusted. She was clearly the same as King Leandros. Shaking the thought out of my head, I removed the red thread from my hand, tying it against her wrist before walking out of the hall.
The journey to the Nisha Kingdom was exhausting and protracted. I had succeeded in getting a hold of myself after bawling my eyes out for hours. I was certain my eyes were red and puffy, but I knew I needed to get it out of my system. We had arrived at the Nisha the following day without taking a break. I guess King Sviatoslavic really did mean it when he said he had matters to attend to. When the carriage stopped, I put the veil on my head as the door opened, and the guard who had helped me up before stood there to help me down the carriage. Once I settled my foot, I turned to look at the magnifying palace. This was way better than ours, if not the best in the entire tribe. The castle door pulled open, and a tall, slender woman with red hair came running toward the king, and he stretched his arms wide, catching her in his embrace. Retorb, sti ajo oti eva woi kab emo. Brother, it's good to have you back home, ... she says, speaking in the same language as the king had earlier. Sti ajo oti eswoi, retsis. It's good to see you, sister, ... King Sviatoslavic responded, looking lovingly at her. As I observed the warmth in his eyes, a sensation that I had never experienced gripped my heart. Who was she? His mistress. How is it possible for him to be so upfront about his feelings for her when they aren't even engaged, or the fact that we had gotten married a day ago? She turned to face me and gave me a melancholy expression, as if she could read my mind. No let ms da tat no reakaf lla gupert 8 yenroj. Don't tell me she had that on her face all through the journey. Yes, it appears to be some sort of custom for the bride to cover her face until she arrives at her husband's home. I think it's just complete nonsense, to be honest. I was aware that he had said it aloud for my hearings. Und Susan, Retorb. No cussing, brother. The woman says it in a condescending manner. She gave me one more glance before rushing past us to another soldier, and they started kissing. The soldier was familiar to me. He had been the only person from Nisha at our wedding, indicating that the king must value and respect him, but that didn't stop the mental wheel from turning. She seemed to be the king's mistress, so how did he share her with his troops? Was this something they did in their culture, or was I just getting ahead of myself? The Nisha king must have observed my bewilderment, because he rolled his eyes and started heading towards the castle. Nervously rubbing my hands, I trod behind him. I could hear the whispers of the soldier and the woman as they giggled and talked amongst themselves like lovers. As soon as we entered the palace, I felt a sense of warmth. It was incredibly lovely and very dissimilar from my kingdom. Even though I yearned to explore the palace more, I knew I had to follow my fictitious husband. It didn't help that the veil was starting to sting, and I took longer strides while moving so quickly that my feet started to hurt. As the remaining troops and the woman continued on their journey, I sighed and made an effort to catch up with him. After a short while, we came to a halt in front of the door, where 2 guards were stationed. "Ruai Itzajam, Your Majesty." They pushed open the door and addressed him in their weird language as he walked in. "You're dismissed." King Sviatoslavic spoke in a firm tone, and the troops bowed, leaving their positions. I was afraid to enter the bedroom, so I stood outside of it. Walking in means sharing a room with him. With my eyes closed, I considered how to get out of this difficult predicament when I heard a step coming towards me. The king's height towered over mine. I believed that we had resolved this. "You don't really expect me to carry you into the room. If you think for even a moment that you will be treated like a princess here, think again. You won't be treated like a queen here. Unlike in your father's palace. Know your place, since you are neither a princess nor a queen. In fact, you are much lower than the lowest servant. Get inside and make sure you are prepared for me when I return." He says this as he leaves the room. I wasn't a fool not to understand what he meant when he instructed me to be ready when he returned. My expression showed the fear I was feeling. I was troubled by the fact that I needed to remove the veil because I knew I couldn't continue wearing it. To add to it, I now had to come up with a plan to avoid officially consummating our marriage. I anticipated it because I had overheard the overhead maids chatting about sleeping with their spouses or potential suitors. However, I had no intention of giving myself to someone I have no feelings for and who hates every breath I take. I may be a pawn for my tribe, but I will not allow a cruel and heartless man like the King of Nisha to use my body for his own pleasure. I entered the room and sat down on the bed to take in the surroundings. It was roomy and elegantly constructed, but it exuded a frigid aura, exactly like its owner. My thoughts were all over the place when I was startled by a knock on the door. 2 young women, perhaps a few years older than me, were standing there at the open door wearing what appeared to be court ladies' attire. They made a pretty awkward bow toward me before giving me a blank stare. "Yes, can I help you?" I asked, my voice coming out as sassy as I intended it to be. "The king has commanded us to get you ready." One of them replied in a very dull tone, as if being here with me was torment. What have I ever done to them, really? I may not even have been here for an hour, but I already felt the love. Observe the irony. I looked at the woman in front of me while rolling my eyes. The Nisha were genuinely blessed with attractive appearances, both in men and women. Every soldier who had accompanied the king from Ahades back here was attractive, making it difficult to identify any who appeared less so. The women I have met so far are also beautiful, even those in the lowest ranks all look like goddesses. I swear inside from envy. I got to my feet because I realized it was time for the truth to come out. I couldn't delay or try to hide the fact that I was the wrong bride. It was preferable to finish it up because it would hasten my demise. They walked in and shut the door behind them as they approached me from across the room. They removed the veil from my head and undid my dress until it was on the ground as I turned my back on them, leaving only my chemise. As they continued to remove the hairpin, my fist clenched and my eyes shot shut. My snowy curly white hair loosened up, falling down to my hips. My neck chain, which, surprisingly, was still on my neck, was unlocked. I inhaled deeply before opening my eyes and turning to face them. A loud gasp filled the room, coming from both women, and I waited for the critic to comment on how I looked, but nothing came. Looking at the woman, I saw a look of disbelief and something I couldn't decipher.